Hi, my name is Rozan. I I have a story to tell, but I don't really know how to start because I feel like mental health is something that doesn't really have a beginning or an end. It's, for me anyway, it was more a case of realizing that something wasn't something wasn't washing very well with my spirit, and I think it's been a journey of doing what I can to recognize, stop, deal, heal, and then continue and kind of live with its existence. So I think it's important to understand that mental health doesn't always, or the deterioration of your mental health isn't a thing that just starts, or just ends. I feel, particularly for me and for a lot of my close friends, it was the realization, and then the working through that continues to this day. So, despite popular opinion about myself and, all the preconceived notions that come along with success, I've realized for a few years now that I have battled with myself and battled with my thoughts, and I've realized that I have all these saboteurs that live within me and are constantly on this toxic mission to bring me down and have me question myself and question even my achievements, despite them being very clear. And it's a conflict. So in 2014, it's almost 5 years ago, I decided for the first time to address the saboteurs that live in my head and deal with it and work through it. And it was a very interesting exploration. It started off more as like a self-feasibility study. I kind of went into my head and just tried to figure out what specifically bothers me. What is it? What am I triggered by? What brings about the saboteurs? And, why do I have moments where I can't get out of bed for days, sometimes 3 to 4 days? What are the specific reasons behind these mini breakdowns almost? And I realized that it wasn't just a matter of kind of mental exhaustion or mental drainage or or mental abuse. I realized that it had a lot to do with food, and a lot of people don't make that connection. They don't often connect food with how you feel. So that was a big lesson for me. I decided for very different reasons to finally visit a man who I considered a hero, Dr. Sebi. Dr. Sebi at the time was living in Honduras, and I'd gone to Burning Man for the first time, and I feel like Burning Man did a lot by way of ridding of certain fears I had, and I just got a ticket after Burning Man and went straight to Honduras. And it was actually after I booked my ticket that I did like a Google search, and I saw that Honduras was, I think, the most dangerous capital in the world, or the capital with the most murders per capita or something like that. It was a very terrorizing headline. However, I still went, and I realized through the lessons I learned from this wonderful man who became a second father to me, that that what you eat is also closely related to how you feel. And when you toxify your body, when you acidify your body, that's when you toxify your mind. So acidity, the physical acidity that exists in your body, is related directly to the toxicity of your mind. I also learned that there's a distinct difference between being mentally ill and just being a toxic human. And I think that the wave of kind of mental health awareness needs to pay attention to that. Because for a long time I questioned myself too. I wondered, if I'm just being hyper negative about myself. And it wasn't until I went and spent a good few months with Sebi that I realized differentiations, and I was able to identify that a lot of my issues came from my childhood. I was bullied, and when being bullied turned me into a bully. So it's a lot like my career. I've kind of lived in both spaces. I was bullied, and I was also the bully, and that was like a defense mechanism. And I felt like I also started bullying myself, and I realized that I was being so hard on myself. And how can you expect anyone to be nice to you if you're mean to them? So that was one of my biggest lessons to myself, that in order for my body, myself, to be nice to me, I would have to be nice in return. So yeah, the self-defamation, the self-sabotage started decreasing at that point. Also, when I started to eat better, when I realized the power of alkaline in your body, when I realized the balance between, acid and alkaline, and the pH necessity that needs to exist within your physical realm, and how that relates to your mental realm, things started changing. And I realized self-appreciation. I realized a need to be less cruel to me. However, I still have moments to this day. I feel that it's taken me my whole life to reach a point of contentment, and the contentment is, it isn't a constant at all. There's no consistency to my contentment. It's something that I have to work on always. And it's something that I've incorporated into a lot of my works, in my mentorship, in my workshops. I always encourage the need to be aware of where you are, and not to ignore it, because, I ignored it for a long time, and then, I'd wonder why I was so exhausted, so mentally exhausted, and it's because you try and block, or you try and just not deal or accept, and and that's also not surprising, because the hardest thing to deal with is yourself. The hardest thing to face is yourself. And it wasn't until I lost patience with myself that I started doing the necessary work. And now Kenya has played a big role in my journey of healing. I feel that Kenya has, and I think this relationship with cities varies for different people, obviously, but for me, Kenya has this beautiful sense of home. I feel like Mother Nature gives me a big hug every time I land in Nairobi. So I've learned that whenever I'm at a point of physical burnout, because of the fact that I have to travel so much and deal with so much and build and cultivate and help and create, and make history. I'm someone that's constantly pioneering, constantly disrupting. I'm constantly faced with challenges, constantly faced with argument. When you're an individual that constantly thinks outside of the box, you're kind of living through this psyche attack all the time, and that is really, really draining mentally as well as physically. So whenever I reach a point of like, oh, okay, I'm done, I'm really done, I come to Kenya. So Kenya has been a real mother in the process, and I'm really happy to see something like Bonga exist, because I'm an African woman, and we all know that there's a lot of taboo around issues of mental health. We all know that there's stigmas and also just really just like a cultural arrogance around mental health. I'm African. I'm not mentally sick. What is that? We go through so much on a physical level that to say that you're mentally unwell is almost bratty. Like, what do you mean? What's wrong with you? You have two arms, you have two legs, you're successful, you're pretty, you're this, you're that. What do you mean? Like, how can you feel like this? How can you feel so down? So there is an arrogance around it that I'll even admit I had about myself. I even had to question myself and be like, you work with children that don't know when they're getting their next meal, and here you are sitting and complaining about complaining to yourself, or fighting with yourself over what exactly. So it's good that a platform such as Bonga exists, so that we can dissect, explore, and really dive into mental health, because it exists. It really does, and it exists just as much amongst us as Africans as anybody else. I do think that we are a little more fortunate because we have great food, great weather. I also feel that the sense of community anywhere you go in Africa is so prevalent and so strong and so beautiful. And, sometimes when you're going through a mental jolt or, a moment, whether it be depression or self-doubt or whatever, isolation can really add to that. And I'm so proud and happy and relieved that the foundations of community exist in Africa. It's just time for us to talk about it more. And that's all. Thanks.